Hello, everybody, and welcome to Nerd for Healing's healing-related videos. My name is Tasmi Anishat, or Smia for short, and I run Nerd for Healing, Yedge Healing Space, and the Breakup Roadmap. So, welcome, and today we're talking about how to do trigger work. So, trigger work is it's pretty self-explanatory. It's, how do you work with the triggers? And I might back it up a bit and say, what is a trigger? And a trigger is, you might be familiar with triggers in the context of PTSD, when, the classic example of, a veteran hears, a loud noise and is reminded of, their wartime days. So there's a whole spectrum of triggers. There's, the extreme end like that. But there's also smaller, everyday kind of triggers, like someone said something in a tone that might have seemed, you don't know if it was kind of belittling or not, but because you sensed a little bit of that, you feel triggered because maybe it reminds you of being belittled by your siblings growing up. And so your response to that remark, which may or may not have been belittling, is over the top. That's one example of maybe something that's a little bit less extreme but still a trigger. So I really believe in trigger work because it shows us where our wounding is. It shows us where we still have kinks in our psyche. And until we actually know about triggers more deeply, a lot of us, what we'll tend to do is just avoid it. Numb ourselves. We feel triggered, so we'll go and binge TV or be on the internet or drink or eat food or smoke weed or whatever just to avoid the negative feelings. Because the thing with triggers is that they feel really uncomfortable. They do not feel good to experience. So naturally we want to do something else that makes us feel better. But in going deeply into the uncomfortable feeling, that's when we get the deeper insight, and that's where we can actually transform the trigger so the thing no longer bothers us. So how do you do trigger work? It's actually really simple. It's just feeling the discomfort. And, that's easier said than done, especially if you have a bigger trigger related to violence or what have you, abuse. So, there's a spectrum. And what I'll say is if it's a bigger trigger, the key to working with that is getting some help to help you hold a space for working with that, and also titration. Titration means basically just kind of easing your way into it, kind of working with your capacity, kind of playing with it, but not pushing yourself too far that you go into fight, flight, or freeze. And that's actually another important part of the trigger work is understanding our go-to stress responses. So, for example, let's go back to the example of someone is maybe making a belittling comment, we don't know for sure. But we automatically go into a fight, okay, this person is treating me like this, I'm going to fight them. I'm going to go on the attack and verbally attack them or whatever. Or, I'm going to freeze, I'm just going to shut down and avoid them. Or, flight, that can be freeze or flight, I guess, depending on your context. So so understanding what your go-to stress responses are can give you a clue as to when you're triggered. There's a quote by Viktor Frankl, which is, between stimulus and response, there is a choice to respond, and in our ability to respond lies there's a space, and in that space lies our ability to respond, and in our ability to respond lies our freedom. So working with triggers and working with our stress responses is really a matter of awareness and ability to see the patterns and seeing them enough so that we can break the patterns. Another thing is that with triggers, sometimes the harder triggers are ones where it's multiple things going on at once. It's not just for example, let's say going back to the belittling example, it's not just that they belittled you, but they made fun of your weight perhaps, and so it's a trigger of being belittled plus a trigger of weight, which maybe you were shamed for growing up. So it's a double whammy in a sense. Those ones are actually harder to unpack because there's more than one layer going on. So let's say next time you notice yourself getting triggered, in the moment you can maybe take a space, if it's not appropriate for you to kind of like unpack it in the moment. But like what I would do is just kind of like, if it's a level of activation that you can handle, like it's not like a super traumatic kind of trigger, then like go back like when you have space and just kind of like take the time to like feel into it, and then kind of ask yourself, okay, like what does this remind me of, and kind of let the answer emerge. Sometimes like the answer emerges pretty quickly. Sometimes it might take a couple of days. So I would just put like the intention out there to be like, okay, like what is this really about? And just let that question like be out there. And like I've never like not really gotten a like if I'm not sure why I'm feeling triggered and I put that question out there, I've never not gotten a response eventually. Just having that intention to be like, I want to know what this is really about. Because yeah, that's the thing with triggers. It's not what it's about. Like on the surface, it's like that person said this comment, but deep like on the deeper level, it's like, oh, I always felt like my family belittled me growing up, and I feel really hurt by that. So there's always like a deeper layer, and that's what trigger work is really about. And yeah, the way to heal it is basically feeling it, and maybe like doing some belief work around maybe some beliefs that might have formed because of that trigger. Like, like I'm not safe, I'm not worthy of being respected. It could be literally anything. It really depends on like what the trigger is. So in summary, triggers are basically, when your response to a situation is not appropriate to that stimulus, and you're feeling like a flight, freeze, fawn kind of reaction. And the way to work through it is actually feeling the discomfort and inquiring what is it actually about. And sometimes you might need to titrate. If it's like too much, you might need to titrate your feeling of the trigger, and you might need to get some outside help to help you process it. So I hope that's helpful, and I'll see you for the next healing related video.